I'm Paul. I'm with Whiskey Squad. I'm also known as Poltergeist. I'm the team captain for this year. Started playing paintball about age 13, so that was about 25 years ago. Got introduced to paintball by actually just stumbling across a paintball magazine at a store, bought it and read it, and it seemed really neat, so I begged my dad to let me play, and he found a field and got me in, and I got to try it out.
And how many years ago was that?
That's 25 years ago.
Damn, you're old.
Yeah, everybody, I'm an antique.
Okay, so what made you continue to play?
I really liked the environment for it. It was just really exciting with what you could do with paintball. So, I mean, yeah, there was capture the flag, but the places that we played at did some bigger games than just doing that. They weren't really considered scenarios back then, but they did have large engagements, and the terrain actually lent for, strategic play. So I fell into playing as a, I guess you could say, recon, and also kind of commanding teams, and I started doing that when I was 15, actually starting commanding and controlling squads. Yeah, I mean, that's basically where it went. This is not until way later in my career in paintball that I actually finally got to do a scenario game. Actually, I think it was 5 years ago I did a 68 calibers Red Risk, and that was my first scenario game. Did
you continuously play after your first time, or was it once and then you didn't play again for a while, or was it immediate, like hooked, and you kept playing from then on?
Well, I was hooked immediately, and so that's not much of an issue. It did originally start out as a once-a-year thing. Then once again, at age 15, it changed. I got my first paintball gun, which was a VM68. It was one of the first mechanical semi-auto paintball guns, and at that point, I was doing side work and all that as a kid. So I literally was playing probably once a month, if not every weekend.
Tell us, what is your game style of choice and why?
It depends actually on what's happening. That will dictate my choice, but the style I guess that's biggest right now for me is I like to do Magfed. So that actually teaches me to be a lot more decisive with my shots. I get to pick and choose my targets, things like that. For me, it's not because I'm better than anybody else. I just like the challenge that brings into the game, because now I have to play harder and play better at certain aspects in order to be helpful or even achieve goals. I have been playing with Hopper for years, and I've been put off from playing with a Hopper for a while, but as of this year I actually got back into Hopper play for certain games and environments.
So how did you get the name Poltergeist?
I actually think the teams should actually choose the call signs for our players, but at the point when I joined Whiskey, we were in charge of choosing them, and so I figured I'd go in the light of what they'd experienced and seen me do. When I first met Whiskey Squad, I wore red camo and a fairly bright gray shirt, meaning like it didn't match the background at all. It was almost like chalk white if you think about it as far as contrast goes. And I would play like that, and people would literally not see that I was coming at them, or in several instances that people walked over me not knowing I was there, even though I wasn't hiding behind a bush. I was just laying in a trail behind nothing. So, we had enough people with ghost names. I figured, well, I'll stick with that theme. And the definition for a poltergeist is an unseen force. And I figured that fit perfectly, because somehow I was unseen and I was a force to be reckoned with in those environments.
What are your 3 do's on the field?
And when you say do's, you mean like just for people in general, or to achieve a goal, or?
In general, especially for newer players, what would you, if you gave them like 3 pieces of advice, or 3, you need to do this, if nothing else, these 3 things, what would they be?
Alright, if we're going to look at new players, I'm going to take this as a group of friends all just showed up. So let's say there's like 5 or more kids, or even teenagers, whatever. And they've never played before. And if I'm not going to be tied to the hip with them to show them the ropes on anything, first thing I'm going to say is make sure that you move as a group, but not too tight. You cover each other's angles. That's the first thing. The second is communication. What you see, your other friends may not see. You have to relay everything to each other. And the third one is just have fun doing it. It's not going to go perfectly, but hey, You have to enjoy it for what it is.
I like that answer. And 3 don'ts.
My biggest one, never, ever, ever take your mask off in the field. Ever. Second is listen to your refs. And, or actually, not no's, but don't disobey the refs, follow the rules. So, and then the other don't is, don't take any of it personally. It's all for fun. People get too heated into these things and can start fights, and there's no need to. It's all just fun competition.
I like that too. That's a good answer.
Now, if you could only give one piece of advice to new or younger players, what would it be?
Well, one piece of advice.
No, baby.
Until
He doesn't want hard in his mouth.
What?
until you've played enough, do not go out and buy a gun. Because you're not going to know what kind of style you're willing to play, and you may be spending money on something that's not useful to you, and you might end up hating it. I wouldn't say that there's anything that bothers or, well, if there was anything, it's the ones that just go out there and they don't listen to the rules and they do take off their mask and cause fights. And I do see that, and I think some people just go out there thinking that you can just do like in the TV shows or movies and just run around with your masks off and laugh at each other and shoot each other in the face. So, I mean, I only encounter that once in a while, and that frustrates me. In fact, that's probably the only thing I see with new players. I think bringing new people into the game actually makes it a lot more exciting because you get to see different aspects of play that they introduce to the game that people may not have thought of before. With experienced players, the things that I see that kind of bother me are I see a lot of experienced players take it personally, and they do things that normally wouldn't cross any other player's mind to do, like either wiping paint off or getting up in somebody's face because of something. And it's not to say that I'm even immune to that. I mean, I've had a bad day and I've went off on somebody, but and I even look at myself that way and analyze it and say, well, as an experienced player, I should have been a better person about it that way. But I think that's what happens once in a while as experienced players. We take it personally because we think that overshoot was intentional when it was a new player, those kinds of things. But that's probably the only thing is just the over competition about it all when there's new players involved. Honestly, I don't even know if I can count it, only because of the time frame that I've been playing paintball. So I mean, it's not that I've been to thousands of fields or anything like that, or even hundreds. It's just I wouldn't be able to give an accurate number, but I'd have to say it's probably been over 20 fields.
What is the farthest that you've ever traveled to play?
From Pittsburgh to North Carolina. Went and did the Folded Gap game.
What year?
That was 2016.
Oh, it's not that long ago.
Yeah.
Let's see. What is the best field you've ever been to?
That's a hard one, really, because every field has its own quirks and uniqueness to them that make them better for one thing or another. The size of the field lends to a better experience in a lot of cases because then you can have any kind of experience for any kind of game. I'd say the best way to answer this is what's my one I like going to the most recently. I'd have to say that would be Battlefront. Battlefront Reloaded over in Ohio.
And what is the worst field you've ever been to?
Once again, that's all a matter of opinion, not based off of experience. But I would say that the worst one I think actually doesn't even exist anymore. I think is, and I apologize if I'm offending anybody, but I believe the place was called Strike First. They're not that far away from Pittsburgh. The only reason I say it's the worst is because it was only one room and it was the size of a double-length garage, and so really nobody had to move to shoot. You could actually just stand at spawn locations and shoot as long as you could see each other. It just didn't lend well to constant play. I think the experience given by either the event holders or even the field owners is what makes or breaks whether or not a place is great, and it falls into a lot of factors after that point. One, can they make it exciting by giving you something to do or giving you enough of an environment to play in? When it comes down to actually the physical location of the field, how well the field is maintained. If you go to a field and there's a bunch of what I would consider hazards, then it makes it hard for it to be an enjoyable experience. So if you have, ankle height sticks that have sharp edges poking out of the ground, I mean, that's a risk if anybody trips. Likelihood is low, but still being impaled by a very large toothpick is not a fun experience for anybody. Refs can make or break a game and field as well. Refs that don't police things well, refs that are too partial to their common and regulars can make it not fun for people that are visiting a field. Refs that actually get into arguments and fights, which I've actually encountered and seen, can really break it as well, because it's not what somebody that's there for everybody's safety should be doing. They should actually only be there to make sure the game's being played well and that everybody's being safe. That's all subjective. I think all equipment is subjective to the person that's using it and what they're doing. Granted, if somebody's a sprinter, I wouldn't suggest wearing steel-toed boots with really, hard ankles or anything like that. You probably want to wear something lighter. In some instances, some would say recon boots. Some people would say, a football shoe or something like that. But it all depends on what you're wanting to achieve. As for me, I always do boots. Mostly because I prefer the ankle support. We're going through, unfamiliar terrain. It lessens the injury on your ankles if you're going through anything and twist your leg or anything like that. Personally, I wear knee-high boots because some of these places get swampy and muddy, and I don't like wet feet. So, and that's what I wear because I know what kind of environment I probably will encounter. But it really is subjective to each person. I always say go with what makes you comfortable.
Are there any events that you'd like to go in the future, like big events that maybe you can't get to on an average day because they're too far away or something like that?
Yes, D-Day, Oklahoma. I wanted to go to that since the first time I read a Paintball magazine. It's a massive World War II scenario game. You actually have to sign up and register for which, not only division, but what squad and unit you're going to be involved in. You actually get to play a role, and they put everybody out in the field. You're looking at, I think, what I've been told is well over 7,000 players. It goes for an entire week. At this point, I had been playing paintball for 20 years, and I had lucked out with never having a groin shot. And we actually, that morning, were talking, and everybody's talking about getting shot, and worst places being shot there. And I'm like, for 20 years, I've been lucky enough, I've never been shot there. And I cursed myself. It was bad enough that I wilted, and the whole game had to be stopped because they thought it was like an actual broken bone kind of injury and all that. It was that strong of a shot, and it hit me just the right way. And even the medic said, he got shot where? And they all just turned around. They didn't even come to help me. After that point, I couldn't play for the rest of the day. I actually sat at the staging area with a bag of ice on my lap. And it even was a pain to drive home that day.
Do you have any hobbies outside of paintball?
I've trimmed some of them down, but I do have hobbies outside of paintball. I don't know if you want to call them hobbies as much as they're just activities. I have active social nightlife, so that's a constant. So I'm always out meeting people. But if you want to look at it as far as collecting things and anything like that, mostly historical memorabilia, such as items from any of the great wars. And then I also like researching history, mostly at this point in my life, strategic analysis of old battles. The other is Star Wars. So I'm big into that. I can tell you useless facts about Star Wars things, like how many turbo lasers on a Star Destroyer. I see us actually trying to expand more. I think us getting involved in the bigger scheme of games is where we're directing things. I mean, we do have players that go across the country and they get requests to go to certain locales for certain games, but I think actually having a bigger footprint and being involved in the bigger games across the country is probably the end game goal. I myself am actually trying to make it where I'm a little bit more available for that, but I do understand traveling constraints, so I would be isolating myself to the eastern part of the United States, or at least the northeastern part. My favorite is back when I first started playing paintball. and this is back when I was still 13, 14. And I had this friend, and it was his first time playing with us. And by then, we had all played about 4 or 5 games, and this is his first time coming out. And it's October, so it's getting cool out. But he's wearing shorts and a t-shirt. That's all he brought for the game. And he hasn't been in the sun much, so he's got really bright white legs and arms and all that. And so we're all at the staging area, and everybody said, "Is that all you wore?" And he goes, "Yeah." And they said, "Everybody aim for the legs." So not even 5 minutes later, we're all walking out there, and I don't see him anymore because I'm looking for the pasty white legs. And what he had done is he had coated his legs in mud. Not really a stupid thing, but at the same time, it is winter, and you're wearing cold mud on your legs. And my favorite thing was right after that moment, so apparently he's worried about being seen. He's covered in mud. So what he does is I see him in a firefight, and he runs immediately and hides in front of a bush and shoots at them. Not behind it, in front of them. And then I watched him just get lit up. And it was a really horrific moment for me, being 14, seeing my buddy get punished in such a manner. But that was my favorite memory, and probably why I still play.
You're such a sadist.
I am.
And what is your worst memory on the paintball field?
Worst memory in paintball field. Interestingly enough, around the same time frame. It was a really cold fall day for that game. Really cold. So much so that you had to power up the CO2 on the markers so they could shoot their proper distance. So technically they're shooting hot if it was in warm weather. So me and my buddy were playing this field, and this field, it lends well to the idea of, if anybody thinks about World War I trench warfare, that's how this field was laid out, and that was naturally that way. They didn't dig trenches, just the water cut the ground just perfectly to make these kinds of trenches. And we're the only 2 left on our team, and we're hearing our team get slaughtered. Like, it's just a constant rain of paint, and you can hear all the people screaming, getting shot. They really got stomped. And so my buddy and I are walking along, scared as hell, and they start shooting at us. So we turn and run, and we run through one of these ravines, and we're running, and he doesn't realize I'm behind him. I guess he thought I got shot. So we ran for about like a whole 2 minutes, and suddenly out of nowhere, he just turns around, and point blank, 1 inch away from my arm, blasts me right in the arm, and it hurts so damn bad because it was cold, so everything stings even more. It was actually bare arm. I don't know why I was short sleeved at the time. In fact, you won't see it on the camera, but there's actually still a scar right here of where the paint pellet shattered on my arm, and they stopped the entire game because they thought somebody had actually gotten injured because I was screaming so many profanities so loudly at him, and it hurt so bad I still want to kill him for that. But that was my worst memory because just what happened right then. In all retrospect of looking at the game, I never regret 1 day of it, and I'm glad I got involved in it, and I hope and wish more people get involved in it because it is a really fun time, and the community actually is better than most other sports communities.